All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer. And for those of you who don't know who I am or what I do, I am a professional athlete in the mountains. I do everything from hiking, running, horseback riding. I've guided, I've been search and rescue, I've been volunteer firefighter, etc. This is kind of what I've done for a living for many years and what I continue to do. So today we are talking about search and rescue. How does it work? I've got a bunch of questions from the Colorado Trail community that I'll be answering. My goal is to answer all of their questions and kind of just give a general overview of how search and rescue in the state of Colorado works. So if you're not in the state of Colorado, this may or may not apply to you, and you need to check how your own individual state works. So that's my preface here is every state is going to work a little bit different. And then also federal is going to work differently. So that means if you're like in a national park, it might work differently than how it will within even just that state, because the National Park Service has their own regulations. Some places they charge, some places they don't. And it's really up to you as the recreationist to find that information and learn it yourself. You can usually pick up a phone and call someone, and someone will walk you through all of this. So today I'm very specifically going to be talking about Colorado, and I'm very specifically going to be talking about it in terms of the Colorado Trail. So I've got, section hikers, day hikers, and my through hikers here. Guys, this is for you. So the very first thing is, for those of you who are not from Colorado, search and rescue here in Colorado is entirely volunteer based. What that means to you as the hiker is that if you call search and rescue, the actual search and rescue will cost you absolutely nothing. Where it will start to cost you money is once search and rescue transfers you from their hands to any sort of medical hands. So if you go from search and rescue to an ambulance, to a helicopter, or they drop you off at a hospital, anything like that, that's where you start incurring costs. But the actual search and rescue itself will cost you absolutely nothing. The only exception to that is if you are found to be needing search and rescue for extreme negligence. This very rarely applies to an individual or, hikers out on their own doing their best they can. This usually applies to like a guide who intentionally pushed people through bad weather, things like that. That's when negligence is going to come in. It's almost never going to apply to an individual unless you do something so outrageously stupid. So search and rescue in and of itself will cost you absolutely nothing. So getting into that part where it does cost you something, that's going to be when you get on an ambulance, whether that's by wheels or by helicopter. So, and if a helicopter or even an airplane, depending on where you're at, comes and gets you, that's usually called an air ambulance. So Flight for Life, Reach are usually, those are the two that are, used the most here in Colorado. They have the right, any of those organizations, to charge you their ambulance cost for wherever they're picking you up from. This is where it gets a little bit tricky and how much it's going to cost. So your medical insurance you already have might already cover these costs, and it will be up to you to check your personal insurance to see if it costs and how much and what's covered. Ambulance is usually covered. So ambulance via wheels, good old standard ambulance. If they meet search and rescue at the trailhead and search and rescue transfers you to that ambulance, that's usually covered by most people's medical insurance. Helicopter or flight insurance is usually not. So there's options here. One option is to go sans insurance, which is actually in the state of Colorado what most people do and most search and rescue will recommend. In the state of Colorado, most, I'm saying most, not all, helicopter and flight companies either have some sort of funding that they set aside specifically for search and rescue. They have grants or scholarships, whatever their special term they want to call it, to help pay off the bill for search and rescue missions that they do. And then a lot of them too, if you simply pick up the phone, you get that big bill. It's really big and scary. You can pick up the phone and call them, explain what happened in your situations. A lot of them will dock that bill down to almost nothing, if not just even waive it completely. So most search and rescue professionals are going to recommend in the state of Colorado that flight insurance is not worth your money. That said, if you do want flight insurance for those helicopter potentials, you have some options. There's literally a company here in Colorado that's called AirMed, and they work with most of the helicopter companies here in the state of Colorado, not all, so you do have to double check that. They do specifically work with the helicopter companies that are going to be in central Colorado along the Colorado Trail out of Buena Vista, Salida, Breckenridge, that region. We use Reach. The helicopters usually fly out of Salida. And then another option that's actually usually a little bit more affordable is if you already have a Garmin device that you are using, Garmin offers search and rescue insurance through Garmin. I've never personally used it, but I've heard it's really good. It covers you internationally for search and rescue up to a certain point, depending on which plan you choose. And it ranges, I want to say, from $50 to $200 a month, again, depending on what plan you choose. So that's like the super basics of the cost part. A lot of people are incorrectly told that in order for search and rescue to be free to them, they must purchase what's called a COSAR card or a Colorado search and rescue card, or have a fishing or hunting license. The other license that some people will carry is a CPW land permit use license that basically says you can be on the land, but you can't hunt or fish. All those cards do not guarantee you free anything, and like it's free without that. You don't need that card for it to be free. What those cards or that charge when you buy your fishing license, your hunting license, etc., actually are is that money goes into a statewide search and rescue funding pool. When you are rescued, search and rescue can ask you if you have a COSAR card or a fishing or hunting license, and they can take down your driver's license information along with that, either the COSAR card information or your hunting or fishing license information. And they can file a report with the state of Colorado that says, we, as in, for example, Chaffee County Search and Rescue North, rescued so-and-so off the trail, and this is the information for their license that says they have paid into that general funding for search and rescue. Then the state of Colorado says, okay, some of that money goes directly to you because you rescued somebody who paid for this funding. And it helps the exact team that rescues you get reimbursed for the costs that it incurred while rescuing you. So a COSAR card, it's like $12 for 5 years, guys. Like, it's basically a really easy way to donate to search and rescue and make sure that if you are rescued, you can tell the team that rescued you, yes, here's my information. I'm glad you can be reimbursed. Thank you so much for helping me. Same thing, your charge is like 25 cents, guys, on your fishing license and your hunting license. It's a really nominal charge. But by having that, you are helping search and rescue be funded throughout the entire state of Colorado. And if you are rescued, the exact team that rescues you can get reimbursed by filing that information with the state of Colorado. So that is what those cards do. That is the basics. So now I'm going to kind of go actually into the questions, because I think these questions that were asked will answer a lot of the more vague stuff for everybody else. And I'm kind of just going to go through it. And then once I get through these questions, I'm going to share my own personal experience having been rescued, and anything else that just kind of comes to mind. So the very first question we have today is, how does texting work with Garmin? Does it reach when you press SOS? Like, do you talk to the sheriff? Who relays, etc.? Okay, so when you have a device like a Garmin, a Spot, there's Zoleo, there's a few others out there. Garmin being the most popular for sure. Who does it contact? If you press SOS on your device, it's going to go to a third-party relay communications service provided by whomever that device is. So if you have Garmin, you press SOS, it's going to go to Garmin's relay service. From there, whomever that relay service is, they will look up your GPS coordinates based off of your device, and they will then contact the local dispatch for your region. That is usually going to be the sheriff's department. For most of Colorado, the sheriff's department for whatever county you're in will handle search and rescue. It is up to the sheriff's department to decide whether or not search and rescue is truly needed. So this means the sheriff's department does technically have the right to tell you, no, we are not going to come rescue you, or sorry, but you have to wait. There are a lot of situations in which that's happened, and that is to protect the volunteers who are on search and rescue. Because again, they are not paid, all of their equipment's out of pocket, and they're doing this solely volunteer. So it is in the sheriff's discretion. And in most of Colorado, the sheriff of whatever county you are currently in is who's going to make that decision as to whether or not to contact search and rescue. From there, the sheriff's office will contact search and rescue. Whoever's on call for search and rescue at that time, they will put together a team and they will start making plans. If you have a device that does two-way text, this is where, guys, it's super, super important. Have a Garmin. Garmin is one of the only devices out there that currently allows for two-way texting with search and rescue when you press the SOS button. That is why search and rescue uses Garmin themselves and prefers communication with Garmin, because you can tell them more information about what's going on. Once everybody is connected and search and rescue is initiated, search and rescue can text you back on your Garmin. Don't turn it off. They can find out more information about what's going on. They can find out more detailed location, because when you give a GPS location, it could be off by miles. They can find out whether or not you're okay to stay the night. They can find out if someone's alive by having a response back. They can get to you a lot faster because they're going to know what to look for and how to talk to you. They could give you instructions on, if you have stuff in your first aid kit, what to use, what not to use, whether or not you should move your location, etc. So having that two-way communication through, whether it's your cell phone or something like a Garmin InReach, is going to be one of the most helpful things you can do, and one of the reasons why devices like Spot are typically not recommended, because they only send a GPS signal and an SOS help to dispatch, and they get zero other information. So that's the answer for who relays. Some of that I'm going to add in. If you dial 911 from your cell phone, there's kind of two things that can happen. If you don't have cell service, but you could turn your phone on, turn airplane mode off, make sure it's not on, and you don't have cell service, dial 911 anyway. While this is slower than using a device like a Garmin or a Spot, it will continue to attempt to ping cell phone towers over and over and over again, dialing 911 in the United States, Colorado. And then it will eventually get through to dispatch somewhere, most of the time. They will not necessarily be able to talk to you if you have no cell service. They will probably take longer to find you than if you had a Garmin or a Spot device that has sent them GPS coordinates, but they're going to get a rough idea where you are and that you need help, and dispatch can send somebody. So that's like your last ditch. You have no cell service and no satellite device. Dial 911 from your phone anyway. Just make sure it's not on airplane mode. And then once you dial 911, do not turn it off. You leave that phone on, even if you cannot hear anybody talking to you. If you dial 911 from your cell phone and you are in the backcountry on a trail and you have cell service, that's going to be substantially faster than pressing your SOS button from Garmin. The reason is it cuts out one of those middlemen of the relay. So when you dial 911, you're going to get standard dispatch for whatever county you're in, and you're going to get the standard question of what is your emergency and where are you located? A lot of times you're going to confuse the dispatcher by not giving them an exact address or a location that makes sense to your town. So for example, when I called 911 from my cell phone, I told them I am on the Colorado Trail 3 miles south of the Clear Creek Reservoir Trailhead. I had to repeat this probably 5 or 6 times to dispatch before they realized I was not in town. And then another question you're probably going to get asked when you get regular dispatch is, can an ambulance reach you? And you need to be crystal clear unless you are literally at a trailhead with a paved road that no, you are on a trail, you cannot get to the road, and an ambulance cannot reach you. What most likely will happen if you dial 911 and get dispatched is that they will have you hang up and they will then call the sheriff's office and find out if they can connect search and rescue to you. They will probably tell you to wait a certain time period, 10 to 30 minutes, depending on where you're located, for dispatch to make a call and for somebody else to call you back. This is where making sure if you have cell service and you dialed via 911, that you stay somewhere you have cell service because they are going to try to call you back at that same phone number you called from. At that point, somebody, either sheriff's office, search and rescue coordination, maybe an EMT, somebody's going to call you back to find out more information and see if search and rescue is truly needed. I will get into more details on my personal experience on that after I go through these questions. Okay, let's see here. So I'm going to kind of skip a question and then go back. Is SOS on the spot or a Garmin effective in communicating to dispatch? Yes. Yes, pressing SOS is a very effective way to get a hold of dispatch. It is slower than dialing 911 directly because you are going to contact via a satellite ping, essentially, a third-party dispatch who will then figure out who your local dispatch is. So it is going to be slower than picking up the phone and dialing 911. It is still the most effective option if you do not have cell service. It's still going to be faster than trying to dial 911 with no cell service. And this, again, if you have Spot versus Garmin, this is where one of the big differences shines on something like a Garmin, is that Garmin has two-way text. They can text you back and let you know they're coming or to give you further instructions. If you have a Spot device that does not have two-way communication and you press that SOS button, you're pretty much in a situation of you press SOS, hang tight, and hope like somebody will be there eventually. It could be hours, it could even be the next day. Especially when they can't two-way communicate and they actually have to figure out where exactly you are and how exactly they're going to get to you. But in general, is it effective way of communication? Yes, absolutely. Okay. What does SAR wish you had or did while you wait? SAR wishes that you have water. Water. Do you have your Garmin, your InReach, your cell phone, some form of communication, preferably two-way, so you can continue to communicate with them and keep them posted. And a first aid kit, at least a basic one. They can give you instructions if you have two-way communication on what to do with your first aid kit, even if you don't know how to use it. So having a first aid kit is super important. Even if you don't know everything in your first aid kit or how to use it, they can give you instructions. This is where that two-way communication is super important. As far as what does SAR wish you did while you wait, that's going to be entirely situational dependent. Sometimes the answer is going to be stay put. Sometimes the answer is going to be they need you to move. And obviously, if you are by yourself and you fall down and you can't get up and do anything and you can just press SOS, your job then is to not hurt yourself further. I like to recommend that your first aid kit should be in reach at all times on your pack, especially if you travel solo, so that if you're in a situation where you fell, you can't take your pack off, whatever, you can still reach your first aid kit and pull out at least like an emergency blanket, or if it's an allergic reaction, pull out some Benadryl, get it in your system. Have that first aid kit somewhere you can reach it so that, heaven forbid, you are alone and something happens, you can at least make it so you can survive, right? Your goal then is survival. Okay. Next question. What would you consider the most important thing to do to avoid needing rescued on the Colorado Trail? Probably the best answer to that is to be basically prepared and to not be overly stupid. Everybody has fun being stupid to a certain level. I gotcha. But have some common sense and use it. More importantly, though, would be to have a sense of where are you going, which if you're on the Colorado Trail should be fairly simple. Far out, gut hook, super helpful. Data book, super helpful. So know where you are and where you're going. Take a wilderness first aid course. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Like even just get the book. You can order the books online. They're fairly cheap. Read it, practice it a couple times, or at least take an online course. In person is always going to be better for those types of courses, but if you can at least get some basic knowledge in on wilderness first aid, it's going to help you a lot in these situations. Um, but really the biggest thing is know your limitations and don't be super dumb. There's a lot of things that can't be helped, like allergic reactions. You can't help that. You fall down and trip and break your leg. You can't help that. It's okay. Um, but when you're calling because you don't have water, that gets a lot more frustrating, and it was probably preventable. Okay. So really the biggest thing is like don't be an idiot. Best strategies to self-rescue and when to know it's time to call. This one gets a little more complicated. This is a really, really great question. The best strategies to self-rescue are always going to be knowledge. The best way to self-rescue yourself is to know, are you really in an emergency situation? Do you have the first aid skills to take care of yourself enough to, say, walk yourself off the trail or get yourself to town? How bad of a situation are you really in? Is it a broken finger or is it a broken foot? Because if I have a broken finger, I can probably get myself to town and self-rescue. If I have a broken foot, probably not. I'm going to want some help. So being able to risk assess those differences and have a basic understanding of your own body and its own personal capabilities is going to be huge. Having wilderness first aid knowledge is going to really help you understand how to differentiate. So I highly, highly recommend anybody and everybody who spends time outdoors take wilderness first aid in at least some capacity, learn about risk assessment. Nothing we do is risk free. Sitting on the couch has a risk. Hiking has a risk. It's about learning what the risk is to the ratio of the likelihood of it happening and your assessment. Self-rescue really just comes down to what is the situation, how much knowledge do you have, and can you care for it? A lot of times, choose one other form of self-rescue that I would put out there from my personal experience is, are you in an emergency situation where you absolutely need an emergency assistance to get out? Or are you in a situation where if a buddy could come and help you just carry stuff out because it got too heavy, kind of situation, and like you don't need medical care, you're totally fine, you're just beyond exhausted kind of situation. And two, if you're a through hiker or even a section hiker on those kind of situations, like, can I just sleep for a day and be fine? Is that where I'm at? I'm just tired. And knowing how to tell your body, and a lot of that's personal, a lot of that's about reading your own body and how to know when it's time to call in the professionals. This one can be interesting. So I'm going to kind of link back to search and rescue in Colorado is completely volunteer. They don't charge. One of the biggest reasons for this is that search and rescue would prefer that you call before you're in a life-threatening situation. So if you are in a situation that could potentially become life-threatening, it's time to call. Because even if you might be okay and might not need help, but there's a chance it's about to become life-threatening, you should call for that help before you are life-threatening and they have to rush to get you, because that's going to help protect you and search and rescue, and they're going to give you better care faster. So a great example of that is you are out hiking and you realize, like, yes, I have stuff overnight, but I'm too cold or I'm too dehydrated and I'm not finding the water that I expected to find. This is actually a situation that happened a couple years ago. As a guy was out snowshoeing and he ran out of water and the creek was frozen over, which he had not totally expected, but he had full overnight gear. It wasn't totally as warm as it could have been for the conditions, but he was safe enough to stay put overnight. So he called search and rescue, and then he hunkered down essentially. And then search and rescue was able to come get him in the morning when it was safer for search and rescue to come get him and bring enough water and help him get out. And everybody was safer because he was prepared. But he also called before he was so dire that it was life or death. Another example would be my own personal one. I was stung by a bee for the third time in 6 days, and my face went numb. I had no idea whether or not my throat was going to close next or it was going to be totally fine. It was one of those things I'm like, I could just be having some weird symptoms because of where I got stung and my face is numb and nothing else will happen. Or I could go into anaphylactic shock at any point now, and I don't know which way it's going to go. I've never been in this situation before. It's time to call, because if I had gone into anaphylactic shock, then the only thing I would have been able to do is press SOS, and I wouldn't have been able to communicate back and forth with search and rescue. So those are some examples. It's like, really, search and rescue wants you to call before you're in a life or death situation. Okay, so that's all of the exact questions I have. So now I'm going to share kind of my own personal story of actually being rescued, what I went through, what I learned. And then also after the fact, later, several months later, I had the opportunity to talk to the coordinator for search and rescue on my specific mission and find out some things. So my rescue was in September of 2022, so less than a year ago. I was hunting in the region around the Colorado Trail, and I used the Colorado Trail to get in and out of where I was hunting. I had been stung on day one twice. I was stung in the thigh and I was stung in the hand. I believe it was a hornet, and I don't know what the second creature was. I had local reactions only to that. I took some Benadryl and I was fine, and I continued my hunt. On day 6, I was packing up to pack out anyway, thank goodness. And I went to, go use the bathroom before I actually lifted up my pack and everything. And a bee got caught in the back of my hair and stung me. And I kind of had that instant reaction, slap the back of your hand. I pulled the bee out. I'm like, oh shit, that's a bee. And kind of felt back there. There was still, I could feel the stinger. I actually pulled the stinger out of my head. And I seemed okay in the moment, like no immediate reaction. I was like, well, I mean, like it hurt, but I was fine. So I picked up my pack and I started walking. About 20, 30 minutes later, my side of my face that I had been stung on started going numb, including my lips. And I was just kind of feeling off. I didn't really have any particular reaction or anything. I wasn't 100% sure what was going on. So I sat down for a minute. I had some water. And I kind of assessed as like, is my face really numb or am I imagining this? And it was really truly numb. And at which point I actually notified my husband first because I knew it wasn't totally emergent. I just texted him and said, hey, this is happening. I'm going to call search and rescue. I had cell service. At this time, I am now on the Colorado Trail and I was walking northbound towards the Clear Creek Reservoir area. So I dialed 911 because I had cell service, and that was much faster to get a hold of somebody than my Garmin. Got a hold of dispatch. I think I repeated myself about 6 times. It's like, I am on the Colorado Trail. I am 3 miles south of the trailhead at the Clear Creek Reservoir. And then they asked me if I could reach an ambulance. Like, no, I cannot reach an ambulance. The closest place an ambulance can get to me is 3 miles away at Clear Creek Reservoir Trailhead. At which point I was told, they try to ask a few questions, and cell service in the mountains, even if you have it, can be a little glitchy, and I didn't hear everything. The dispatch person that I had seemed a little bit confused, and she tried to tell me to turn around and go back, and that was to climb up a really tall pass. And so because I knew exactly where I was, what the terrain was like, and where I was headed, this is where that's actually super important to note, is I was able to tell her, no, I am not in a physical condition to climb back up that pass. I'm going to continue myself towards Clear Creek Reservoir. At this point, I was still capable of walking, and I knew that if I could continue towards the trailhead, I would be able to get help faster. So I would continue walking as long as it was safe for me to do so. After dispatch hung up, they told me it'd be like 10 to 20 minutes. Somebody should call me back. Um, I took Benadryl. So I'm like, I don't know how bad this is. At this point, I've already taken my Zyrtec less than an hour ago. Zyrtec would normally be the first go-to an allergic reaction, but since I had just taken it, I took Benadryl, which is step number 2. Um, so I took my Benadryl and I have my inhaler because I have asthma very close by, but at this time I'm noticing I don't need it, which is actually a really good sign. I continued to walk. It was a really slow walk. I felt really funny, a little bit dizzy, trying to like pay extra close attention. And it was about 35 minutes. I was literally dialing 911 a second time because they told me to call back if I didn't hear back. And I was starting to dial 911 when my phone rang. Answer your phone. So if you don't recognize the number, don't care. Answer your phone. You just dial 911. They told you someone's going to call you back. You should answer. So I answer the phone and they have an EMT on the phone with me and they have the sheriff's department on the phone with me trying to find out what happened. I explain again, I've been stung by a bee. My face is numb, feeling a little bit dizzy, currently still able to walk. At this point, they get search and rescue also on the phone with me and the coordinator, and they're trying to tell me that my GPS coordinates from my call, because they're going to pull the GPS coordinates from my 911 cell phone call, have me on this ridge about 3 miles east of where the Colorado Trail actually is. And this is again, where knowing where you're at is super helpful. It's like, no, that is not the GPS coordinates I am at. I am for sure on the Colorado Trail. I am 100% on that. I gave them new GPS coordinates, and the GPS coordinates still put me about 2 miles off of the Colorado Trail, despite the fact that it was very much so on the Colorado Trail. So I clarified for certain, I am 100% sure I am on the Colorado Trail. At this point, they start asking me questions in regards to what is the terrain like around me. And they're trying to figure out how to land a helicopter to get to me. At this point, their options that they're seeing looking at like satellite imaging, which can be old, is there's the top of the pass, which I've already said, no, I am not capable of going back to that pass. That pass is more than 2 miles away from where I'm currently standing, back uphill, and I cannot get myself there. I know that I'm not in physical condition to get there, but I can head downhill towards Clear Creek. The other spot were having a hard time describing it, but because I was taking that extra effort to go slow and pay attention to my surroundings, I understood that they were trying to describe this area that I had actually just walked through. On a satellite imaging, if they take it in the fall, an aspen grove might look like a field. So I don't know what satellite imaging they were looking at, but they're trying to land in this place about a half a mile behind where I had just walked through. And I was able to tell them, no, you're not going to be able to land a helicopter there. It's actually a large aspen grove. There is no meadow. And so they start asking me now, because clearly I know where I'm at. Do you know where we could land a helicopter? And I have one idea that comes to mind. It is where they actually put the helicopter down. And that is that meadow at the top of Clear Creek. There's the top of a Jeep road that kind of comes up, and there's 2 signs that say Colorado Trail, no motor vehicles. And it's a meadow, but it's not a very big meadow in comparison to the size of a helicopter. So what they ended up doing is they ended up sending a helicopter to that region, and the helicopter circled the meadow. And then they were able to get a guy on a bike who started biking up from the Clear Creek Reservoir trailhead on the Colorado Trail. And then they also managed to get a hold of a guy who knew that Jeep road that connects up to the trailhead, to the trail there where it's not really allowed. And they sent them up in a pickup truck and a fire truck. They were able to get one of the fire trucks from the volunteer fire department to come up towards me, trying to figure out, okay, if we've got 3 angles, can somebody get to her fast? I actually beat all of them to this said meadow. I'm not really sure how. I found myself puking on the side of the trail right before I got there. So I know at this point, like, I'm not in great shape, but I'm also still breathing and I'm still talking and I'm still walking, which is all good. I put my pack down, and I've also at this point told search and rescue I've been hunting. I'm in camo. I've taken off my camo shirt. I'm wearing just like my tank top. At least it's not camo. And what is a distinct feature? A distinct feature, because I'm wearing all camo and I'm unable to get into the bottom of my pack where my blaze orange is at this time, was I have bright pink and yellow feathers on my arrows. It was archery season. That's the most distinct feature I could come up with. Luckily, being a female hunter with a bow is somebody they're not going to see much of on the actual trail. And I got to the area. Playing charades can come in handy because if a helicopter's circling, they might be trying to tell you something. So they actually opened the helicopter door and were waving signs to me out the helicopter door because they needed me to move so they could land. So I picked up my pack and I moved over and I kind of crouched down. And they amazing flight skills. I'm so impressed with these guys. They landed between the trail that says Colorado Trail that goes both ways and then the no motor vehicles sign. And they were able to come check me out medically. Right after the helicopter landed, the fire truck made it up the Jeep road, and then a few minutes later, the guy on the bike made it up. So everyone's there. I'm getting a full checkout. We ultimately determine I am not in an emergent situation. I do not need to be flown to a hospital. However, it is my choice as to whether or not I want to be flown out on the helicopter to a hospital, or if I feel okay. I ultimately decided that because my particular search and rescue team had a medical doctor present, that if the doctor felt that I was truly not in an emergency situation and I did not need to go to the emergency room, then I was not going to go to the emergency room. So we waited for the helicopter to fly off, and I was given a ride down in the fire truck and got my car and got to go home. In that, you also learn too is like one thing to keep in mind if you are if they're talking about a helicopter, is helicopters are actually very finicky flight creatures. They cannot fly if it's too hot due to the pressure changes, especially at high altitude. There are certain altitudes most helicopters cannot fly to. High winds is going to affect a helicopter's ability, and these are all things that occur regularly on the Colorado Trail. So after all that, kind of what happened is in the fire truck, I was able to give the guy at that particular time I was hunting, so he took my hunting license. I have a hunting license, a fishing license, and a Coast Guard card. I could have given him any of them. He chose to take my hunting license since he picked me up as a hunter out there. You give him that information. He took a picture of my driver's license just because he didn't really have like a way to write the information down very well. And they took that back to their SAR headquarters and would report it that they rescued me, compensate them for their time and any resources used. Because I did not board the helicopter, they would not have charged me. That was completely free that they came out and checked on me as long as you did not get on a helicopter. That's the same for an ambulance in town. Like if you call an ambulance to your house and they don't actually drive away with you in it, they won't charge you. Had I gotten on that particular helicopter, it was reached out of Salida. I found out they would not have charged me. They consider that a training, and they had fun with that, and they actually really enjoy doing search and rescue. So I would not have been charged for that particular flight on that particular day. That can change day to day, but again, most of them are not going to charge you, or the charge is going to be nominal. Whew. All right. So after that, I went and checked with my doctor. I was fine. I went through a bunch of testing to find out, was I truly allergic to the bee, or was it you can have toxic reactions from stinging insects because of some of the things they eat? And the answer kind of came up, you're negative for an allergic reaction, but you might still be allergic. So it was probably a toxic reaction, but there's really no way to tell. And afterwards, I got to talk to the search and rescue command and who was coordinating all of it. And ultimately, I was told, you actually did everything right. And we're so glad you called. And we're like so glad you're not the person who just ran out of water. We love doing these rescues where somebody is unsure if they're about to be in a life or death situation. And we are so happy you called. You did everything right. Thank you so much for being knowledgeable about what to do. So really hope that sharing my story really helps. And if you have any other further questions that I didn't answer in this video, please feel free to comment below. I'm going to share this to all of the Colorado Trail Facebook groups, so feel free to leave comments there. I will also put a link in on how to donate to SAR and where to get your COSAR card. And And please, by all means, if you have further questions, ask because being educated is probably the best thing you could do for any sort of thing happening. I hope you all have a wonderful day and happy hiking.